We're live.
Thank you. Good morning. Before we start the meeting, I'd just like to read an announcement. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sounds recorded may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As well as being broadcast live, a recorded version of this remote meeting will be uploaded onto the Council website for public viewing as soon as possible after this meeting. Whilst translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request, members dialing in remotely, please only turn on your cameras when you wish to speak, and please remember to switch it off when you are finished. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using any mobile devices during the committee and that any devices are on silent? Can I also remind members to ensure that their chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item? Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. Thank you. Okay, so item 1, do we have any apologies? Thank you. Any others? Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of April 2023. Are there any points of accuracy?
I think it comes as an accuracy. There was something said by the former chair, which I think I highlighted it on my copy. There was a statement made. Sorry, can't find it now. I highlighted it on my copy and then saved that copy, but I can't see where I highlighted it. There was a statement made. Sorry, because we need to do it now, don't we?
Yes.
There was just something for clarification that I didn't quite understand how the former chair's words had been put down. Sure, it was not very far in. It passed something that's marked in yellow. Sorry, I think I can't find it now, so I think I'll have to. My apologies, Chair. I think I'll have to leave that.
Are there any other points of accuracy? I have a couple of very minor questions, if I can. I think it says there was a full complement of staff in the Democratic Services team. I think it should be complements, not compliments. So.
No, I'm sure we would.
Yes. The other thing, and as a new chair, I'd like to understand why it is that in the minutes the chair is referred to, but when we detail it, it says a committee member commented. Is there a reason that we don't identify the people who make the comments?
This is something that through all the committees we try to depersonalise them, and you'll see that we as a committee we act as a whole, and if there is something I said and someone disagreed with, and we wanted to we would happy with the vote. Becomes a corporate decision in this committee. That's
right. So this is harmonisation. So this is, as you say, it's a cross.
And this is something we did discuss at the scrutiny chairs meeting back in. No, it's been since the elections, and that's the legal advice that we've had. Being a legal officer and Elizabeth this summer.
Okay, that's my clarification. Yeah. Thank you. One very minor point. There's a missing apostrophe on presiding members. It makes it look like we've got more than one presiding member. Oh, page 9. And it's about, I don't know, 6-7 lines down. That's all my thoughts on the papers. Minutes. So next, item 4, we're moving on to the Constitution update, and I believe Is that your mind?
Yeah, I mean, there's not much of an update to give, really, Chair. The model constitution has now been approved in its final form. And obviously what's going to happen over the next few months is the council's going to need to implement that. That's not going to be done in one go. That's going to be done bit by bit, and reports will be brought to this committee as the bits of the constitution are put forward for amendment. This committee will be asked to consider reports on those different sections of the constitution. So that's where we are with it, really. I think things will come out on that over the next few months, but there's not a tremendous amount more to report at this stage. Probably I can't take any questions on that, but
Do we have any questions from members on the constitution update? I was of the understanding that it was part of it was to make it clearer.
yeah, so the object of the exercise here is a model constitution to be adopted by all local authorities in Wales, because different local authorities have different constitutions. They vary quite a bit. Some are very, very detailed, some are lighter detailed, some are clearer than others. Some cater for different things. The aim is to get consistency across the 22 local authorities in Wales, to make the thing easy to interpret, both, I suppose, for those members and officers and also the general public. Obviously, different councils do things slightly differently, so the model constitution has still got to be tailored slightly to reflect how this council works, for example, in comparison to one of its neighbours, and that's why it's got to be gone through bit by bit.
Right.
And if I'm not sure, the previous legal officer commented on a number of occasions how this one had evolved rather than being if you like start from scratch. And of course, it's an amalgamation of Newport Borough, Wayne County, and preceding councils.
Right.
Members. A lot of stuff is maybe duplicate, slightly different. It was always a massive task that he was contemplating.
You do find these documents, they can gather a life of their own after a while as things get added in and taken out. And I don't think the current one is horrendous, to be fair, but I think what this enables the council to do is just sort of harmonise it, and as you say, take out those bits where there's duplicity, and perhaps look at whether we could get a bit more detail on some things and make it a bit clearer.
So could you, Mike, just outline the timescale in terms of how you see this progressing and how it's going to come back to us?
I haven't, let's indicate a time scale.
No, it will be split. What will happen is sectional reports will come here almost, so that might be one on budget setting process, for example. So it'll be brought to this committee in piecemeal. However, obviously the overall strategy for Wales has been approved. So I think perhaps what we could do is have a look at the forward work programme and sort of set that committee so that that's clear on what's been brought through and when.
I mean, I would say, given the amount to get through, it's going to take
Yeah.
at least several months. I would anticipate you're going to be considering a bit of it at each meeting going forward. I don't know for how long.
I think it would be key to prioritise, obviously the most important ones, perhaps ones where we need to get that in first of all and do it that way.
Will it then go to council as a complete package and look at those stages?
I think it will probably go on stages again, so as soon as it's approved through here and then.
That would seem to make sense.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're going to be taking something to council that's been approved by this committee possibly 12 months earlier.
Yeah. Okay, that makes good sense. Thanks. Any other points? Questions? Okay, so item 5, participation strategy update.
Thanks, Chair. Just need to give this one for the committee. Would you mind sharing the slides for me, please? So, prior to May 2022, the committee was asked to support the development of a participation strategy for the council. I know there's been changes to the committee members, so it'll be useful when we've talked about it in previous meetings to come back and give a bit of an update on what it was, why we adopted it, and what the strategy sets out.
Leanne, can you see the slideshow?
We can't, no, it just looks blank at the minute.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay. One moment.
And it's still blank. Shall I join the meeting and share my slides?
Just one moment.
I
you
can see
any-
them. Oh,
Right.
I can see
can
them
you-
remotely.
Yeah. Leanne, can you see them?
You can see your screen now, but it's still blank.
Yeah, I'm just. Apologies, it worked before. How about now?
Still blank, Anne.
No, okay. It's appearing on the two screens, so it's showing. I'm trying to get it over to the other screen. Just one last try, one moment.
Yeah. Anyway, oh, I can see it on the screen, but it's not showing on the meeting board for some reason.
We had this problem last night at the partnership scrutiny as well.
What I'll do, Anne, if I'm in the meeting, if I just share my screen and then I'll run through my notes on paper.
Right, sincerest apologies, Leanne.
No worries.
I think I almost had it. Okay.
Same issue.
Are you a presenter? Have you got presenter status?
Yeah, it's showing on this. I think it's showing for people at home, but it's not showing on this. I think this screen might be the issue.
Do you want to run to yours and then we'll try and keep up? And,
Well,
are there many graphs or things that it's going to be?
yeah, it might be. I just wondered the options are. Chair, I could go through and just do this in an oral presentation, but I wondered if you might want to take 5 minutes to get SRS to have a look.
I'm happy to take 5 minutes.
Yeah. And do you mind just pausing the recording for the moment? Committee members, we're just going to take 2 minutes and see if we can get this issue resolved. Apologies.
No problem.
I think we're running back and twist the magic.
Okay. Good. So,
I'm on. No.
I can mute your audio as well.
The one next to you is the one you normally do.
okay,
Great.
lovely, thanks. So here we are back. We're on the 5 participation strategy update. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks, Chair.
That's what we're in the co-chamber.
Yeah, so
Somebody's not muted.
Can you help me? I've got something to use here. Obviously not the right thing. Thank you.
okay,
Thanks, Chair.
that's perfect, thank you.
Yeah, so today's just a bit of a refresher on the participation strategy for the committee. So the committee was instrumental in developing the strategy ready for the adoption in May 2022. So the participation strategy was required under changes to legislation under the Local Government and Elections Wales Act 2021. So we did produce the rapidly through the Democratic Service Committee. It was adopted by full council at the May AGM last year. And that's published on the website. As part of the actions into that strategy was also to develop a petition scheme that sets out how this petition can be submitted, how the council will respond to them, and where they will be considered. So those documents, the links there were, I will share the slides part of the minutes to share with members following. And as I say, both of those strategies and schemes were adopted back in May, I should say 2022. Okay, so just a little reminder of what we talk, when we talk about participation. So these working definitions are informed by Practitioners' Manual for Public Engagement taken from Participation Cymru in 2012. So there are essentially 3 parts to this. So engagement, which is an active participative process. So making sure that people can influence and shape policy and services that affect them and can be conducted through a wide range of different methods. Then we have consultation, which many will be really familiar with, part of the formal process by which we seek feedback on those policies, so that policymakers and service providers can ask for the views of interested groups and individuals. So that happens frequently throughout the year for many council services, but obviously the key ones that we look at on an annual basis is our budget setting process. And participation as an overall is really about people being actively involved with policymakers and service planners, feeling like their views do make that difference and having that level of engagement where they're happy to participate and take part as they can see the result of the feedback that they're giving. So really important that it is part of early stage of policy development and review rather than just going out with the final options at the end. So there are specific duties under that Local Government and Elections Act of Wales, which the council is required to fulfil. So these are embedded as part of our strategy. So the key areas of promote awareness of the functions of the council that they carry out to local residents, businesses, visitors, and sharing information about how to go about becoming an elected member of council and what the role involves. Providing greater access to information about decisions that have been made or that will be made by the council, and provide and promote opportunities for residents to provide feedback to the council, including comments, complaints, and other types of representations. And lastly, promoting awareness of the benefits of using social media to communicate with the residents and councillors. Key to note about the duties is they're really clear on providing information and updates to residents before you're asking them to make give feedback on big decisions. So it is about general sharing of information, going out there, creating that communication rather than just reserving it for consultations only. And I think perhaps the board meetings framework that's been adopted is a good example of that, where there are key parts of that framework now. At certain point in the year, information will be shared with residents other than just being about consultation points. So the principles of the strategy, which we agreed, were to build on the strengths that are already in place. So the council has lots of participation activity already embedded. So there are some really good key strengths of good practice that are already happening. But the strategy also looks to build on those, including some additional actions that support that further progression and development. And I think the key expectations of all local authorities in Wales is that councils will build on that good experience that they already have and move towards greater levels of participation. So we did do some consultation with residents, and it did, give some clear results that they are interested in the decisions that councils make. They would like to have more of a voice in that process. They felt that there was room to improve in terms of engagement and involvement in those decision-making processes. And they also felt that the actions outlined in the strategy would help residents to become more involved in that process. So the feedback from residents also said that they were seeking more varied and alternative methods of communication, and particularly looking to engage with some of our potentially larger groups. So the monitoring process is about looking at that strategic aim. So what we already have in place to build on those actions that we set out as being able to build on that experience and platform to get better, and then also having those measures in place that make sure that we can track progress as we're going along. So there's individual performance measures that are tracked within service plans. We think about the democratic services service plan under the Wales standards. Some of this is also embedded in other areas where we can get back complaints, compliments, feedback from residents, and also there's lots of documentation about consultation embedded within some of the other service plan areas too. And progress against the participation strategy is also reported through the council's annual self-assessment report. So this comes under wellbeing objective around improving participation and involvement. So just a reminder of some of the key actions under the strategy. So develop and publish a scheme that sets out how the council deals with petitions, which has already been documented in place, it's published. We had published a guide to the democratic process. So that has been documented. I know when Mike was talking about the All Wales Constitution earlier, there was also an All Wales guide to the Constitution, which was approved as the final draft a bit earlier than the Constitution model. So that was adopted and published through the committee, and that's published as a pre-read to the Constitution almost. And then we have got a few there that we need to look at over the coming months. So we've got review and update scrutiny public engagement strategy, particularly with respect to hybrid meetings. So the scrutiny public engagement strategy, the last time that was looked at would have been back in 2017. So obviously, some significant changes have been made during that time, not the least of which was that adoption of hybrid meetings last year. So I think that would be one we bring back to scrutiny chairs and committees and talk through. you know, what we need that to look at and how we need to update it. Second on that list then is promoting awareness of the benefits of using social media to communicate with residents to councillors. So we know that we had a big task last year in, you know, getting the induction training underway and making sure that members had what they needed to do their duties as part of the new year in post. We did have a WLGA session that was shared on social media, but I think this would be an opportunity for us to look at what we're providing as a council and build on that and support our members in that way. And then lastly, looking to share a survey with our residents. So this is based on a national survey for Wales, which has been used as a benchmark, which talks about factors that are linked to people feeling able to influence decisions affecting their local area. So this was a measure that we put in as part of our service plan. To say for 22-23, we've looked at the existing national survey for Wales as our benchmark, and then we would be looking to do some work this year on our own survey to build on that and focus on residents in Newport. So some of the key questions that we have replicated so that we can understand if we've got that benchmark, you know, how does it compare to local data that we collect. So this includes, to what extent do you disagree or agree with the statement, I can influence decisions affecting my local area, whether Newport City Council asks people for their views before setting budget, what extent residents agree or disagree that they would like more information on how the council is performing, and also to what extent they would agree with the statement, I would like to be more involved in the decision my council makes that affect my local area. So it's quite short, quite simple, but would give us that local data to be able to compare it to the national survey, which does go down into specific areas, so we could compare that quite easily. We could add more questions to the survey. I don't know if the committee wishes to give some feedback, whether they'd like to extend it or not. But we have found in the past that obviously trying to keep it short and to the point gives us more opportunity to get those responses back. I think that concludes my presentation, Chair.
Thank you, Leanne. So any questions, observations, Kate?
Just an observation. I'm not quite sure whether that should be the first question. I think the first question was more, do you know how you can influence decision making within the council? And I mean, the majority of people would actually say, no, I'm quite sure about that. So you've got to give people an opportunity to realise, make a statement that they can influence them, and to tell them how they can influence it, and then perhaps ask them if they're aware of that, or if that has been effective for them.
Would it be something around, you know, in previous surveys when we've talked about feedback, almost like, you know, how often do you get in touch with the council?
Yeah, but I mean, maybe something like this, have you contacted your local councillor? I mean, really, for a lot of people, I still think maybe some people aren't even aware who their local councillor is. Yeah, you know, so it will be, you know, did you know that you know, your local councillor? So it's a broader piece of information that should be put out, perhaps using the newspaper and things like this. You know, there are ways to contact your local councillor, and they deal with these issues. So I had a very long meeting with somebody yesterday about, they presented me with a very long list of about 15 things, and 2 of them were actually council issues, I think, or issues which we could influence. So, yeah.
Well, that is a challenge, isn't it? About clarity on service provision, and you know, we work a lot of partnership. Yeah. And actually, residents the line can get blurred.
Yeah, this is fine, because at least he didn't know what he didn't know, and I had an opportunity to inform him about the work of the council and how we do it, and actually gave him a guided tour of the new library and what he played there, which was, well, you know, we both benefited from that. But this, it's most of the time, the majority of the residents who live in my ward would never, I don't hear from them, and I actually suspect they probably wouldn't, you know, would be unaware actually of how many ways there are of contacting me.
Chair, just if you have 8 and 2. I'll try and move my voice again, but in Newport we find that everybody thinks the MP does everything, and their offices are very busy as it thinks to us because it's a council function, and they just don't understand that the MP doesn't do everything, and more than that, they think the MP is in charge of us.
Yes, what dangerous, I think.
Yeah.
That for me, yeah.
You find that, Mark?
Yeah. I think it's more confusing than that, though, because you've also got the AM, the MP, and in some areas you've got community councils, and there's a hierarchy. There's 4 or 5 levels of local government, sorry. And people are confused, and some people think I'm an MP. You know.
Oh, no, maybe the case in future. The AMs don't seem to figure, you know, it's the MPs that figures, that even though most of the services are actually Welsh Government issues.
Yes, and it's difficult to understand, you know, what's Westminster, what's in the case of the East, what Jessica Morden does versus John Griffiths, and yeah, but hopefully each of these people point to the right direction. So I know personally that I've had the MP send people to me, and I've probably done the reverse with the MPs and the AMs. So.
It's not interesting because I found you can see that people get the numbers off the AM confused, and there's very little sort of referral to people saying that they're writing to the MP. It's going to be Welsh Assembly business that they confuse with council business. But I mean, you know, we are quite lucky. There's a lot of, you know, two-way referrals going on. But if people never make those inquiries, they'll never have an awareness of that, would they? Because it's not something that tends to be publicised, or we don't spend much time, you know, raising their awareness of these things. So that's the important thing, isn't it? I mean, you mentioned they gave an example of the ward meetings as an opportunity to spread these messages and encourage people to have a say on things. But actually, it's really, really dependent on the publicising of those ward meetings, raising awareness of those. And if it's just figuratively a whisper somewhere, we're never going to get people to turn out. And, you know, we usually request at least 100 flyers each between the 2 councillors in my ward, and then that's dependent on us putting them through people's letterboxes, you know, and we wouldn't normally get any help with that. But, you know, we really do need the council very strongly to take every opportunity to promote ward meetings in specific wards. I really think that's important if we're going to make that channel of communication fly.
I think from the council website, in terms of getting in touch with your councillors, that's pretty good. And we all probably get emails where people have mailed to you do that route. That seems to work well. One of the things that has changed when I first joined, my mobile phone number was available, so people could get in touch with me. But the policy seems to be these days that people don't put their phone numbers out. But there it is.
I don't think it's a policy.
It's a choice.
It's a choice. Yeah, it's a choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and my home line is publicised. I don't give out my mobile, but my home line is publicised. And I do get calls on that, but it's in the public domain. But I know a lot of councillors choose to use the information, the general number. And then we get complaints on people, don't we, about the service being bad. People like to tell us that the service is bad when they ring the general number. Personally, I haven't had that experience if I've been waiting at ages, because there are times when I ring them as well. But this is what people reflect to me. And it really should be, you know, if they're having that negative experience calling that call line number, then really I think councillors should think twice about whether they use that as the primary way of contacting them.
Yeah, I think there's some challenges with the volume of contact and kind of spread that resource effectively, as with lots of areas. And obviously we've got the interactive forms online in a variety of different ways. But yeah, we can have a little think about, you know, maybe it's
Perhaps encouraging councillors to think about whether they should make ways of contacting them more immediate than going through the council information line as a medium.
And I agree with what you're saying, because I believe it's down to the individual councillors to make sure that their information is out in the public. For myself, that's why I put in board. We went in posting 12,000 leaflets when we got first elected. There were contact details, email addresses, mobile phones. So we know the residents have got it by leaflet. We also manage social media, so we know that they got the contact us via Facebook Messenger, etc. And I don't believe we got any actually enough more meetings. I think it's going to be individual councillors who can sell themselves.
Every councillor has a vested interest in voting themselves.
Yes.
A lot of the onus, I think, is on the councillors themselves. And if they want the number publicised, if they want more meetings, then I think it's our responsibility individually to do a lot of the spade work.
I mean, we're primarily here for our residents, we're not there for the council.
Right.
You know, so I wouldn't want us to give an impression that we are hiding behind a council facility rather than actually being approachable directly. That's my personal view on
I
it.
agree with that.
That's a very good point.
just going back to the board meeting, councillor, we've got a lovely new flyer design now, so let's come back. It's ready to be shared. The comms team are fully on board, looking at social media platforms, websites, timescales allowing, at updates for Newport Matters newsletter.
Because I worry about this leafleting, you know, relying on leaflets, because there's an awful lot of steps in my ward. You know, and also we will never get round, you know, this will not be a full leaflet drop to every individual living in the ward. We haven't got capacity for that.
So the 6 months to drop all.
Yeah, so I mean, we won't be doing that as a drop to every individual house. So we're going to need, you know, more support, increasing amount of support from the council, using every avenue that they've got.
Okay, so Mark, you look deep in thought.
I only thought,
Thank you.
I'm going to a ward meeting as soon as we finish here this morning at the Methodist Church in St Julian's, and if I get 2 handfuls of people, I'll be really, really pleased.
It's the same people, isn't it?
Yes.
We had more meeting yesterday. We had a good turnout in about the seats level. But you know, I say we had about 40, 50 people. That was brilliant. We had ward meeting previous month, we had quarterly. You know, so
It's issue related. When I first got elected, the hot topic with gypsies and travellers, my first ward meeting, there were 800 people. That's more than that, isn't it?
My first ward meeting was a mural being taken.
Okay, so I've got a few questions and comments. On surveys, it's very difficult to design a survey, and I think it's very important that every question you ask, that you were able to do something with that information, rather than just ask questions because the questions look like nice questions to ask. What you do with it, what can you do with the information you get? It should be foremost in your mind, yeah. Rather than just giving people a warm feeling that you're asking them questions.
Can I come in on that, Chair?
Yeah.
It's consultation going forward, so we send them a consultation, we get the answers back. Do we analyse those and look to see where we need to throw feedback? And maybe in the next consultation, which might be 6 months later, or a different question that maybe looks at a smaller part of the overall question. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so along those lines, the National Survey for Wales is obviously a big national survey that's conducted, including Newport, and the link that shared in the slide shares the feedback specifically from the residents. So there's 4 or 5 questions that we've had as a minimum mirror some of those questions, so that we can do a direct comparison to say, okay, well, this was in 2022 was the last of the national survey. You know, obviously we're running it now, which is a little bit further on. Have we made any progress? Have we gone better, worse, or stayed the same? So that would be what we're going to do with that. But yeah, perhaps we can think about adding a couple of additional questions that are really focused on specific topics so that.
Is there a place as well, a one place, virtual place, where we can direct people to go to see the analysis of those consultations? Can we have a dedicated place on the website, for example? So it's easy for us to say, well, you're asking me what the feedback comes from whatever survey it was. Can I advise that you go to this part of the website?
It's certainly paid for consultations.
Right,
So
I know there's paid
Yeah.
consultations, but it isn't
Yeah.
actually giving you the results.
There was, I can't remember exactly these ones, but there was, well, one of our team found information on the website, but it was difficult to find.
Yeah, and this is what we need, isn't it? We need to be able to, and we need to be clear where it is as well.
Mm.
Because I know that I've seen figures for the increased use of consultations. For example, when we started engaging with Newport buses,
Yeah.
and jumping into their provision of Wi-Fi. But I can't remember where that was. I can't remember. I know I've seen this, but I can't remember where it's been.
I think that would probably run to service area and part of their feedback.
So we need to know where it is, and we need more analysis to look at place that we can apply to people to do.
Two other points. On the strategy, and maybe it's driven down a little bit, but you seem quite light on metrics and KPIs. How do you measure what you're doing, and is that part of your strategy?
Yes, so strategy itself did have, under those 5 key areas, it did have, as I say, whether we that we already do as well, and that platform to build on. Then some key areas of actions, and there were more than ones I've shared in the slides. I just picked up the key ones there. And then for each of those, and then were a set of actions to say that, sorry, to set of measures to say, this is what we're going to measure going forward. And last year, for quite a few of those measures, they were brand new. We hadn't had the strategy in place before. So it was really a period of recording for the first time. And then this year, we'll be looking at that and say, okay, well, this is our benchmark, this is our target now, and this is how we wish to progress.
But I think when you look at, I think it's the budget and the consultation, and the number of people that fed back was very small. And I think you would call it biased sample. The people who are highly motivated to feedback will do that. And that can give you a misrepresentation of what the feeling is.
It's a big challenge, yeah.
It's a huge challenge.
I think, as you said about board meetings, sometimes, there is a danger that when we open consultations on any topic, we won't get the same people who are engaged and wish to be engaged. So I think part of what we're looking at in the strategy is going to engage with the highest reach groups. I think the participative credits process has been a really good example of that. But they've got some really good engagement, and gone out with a variety of measures face to face, doing the bus Wi-Fi.
That's not, was that part of the participatory budgeting?
Yes.
This year, right? Because the other, with the participatory budgeting, what was previously said, people who have a particular cause which they support will come out in numbers. So it's actually, the feedback I've had from charities and small groups private funding is that, what their feelings are is that it's a question of motivating, mobilising your supporters, which isn't necessarily in the spirit of things, is it? You can have, very much needed and neglected areas of service provision that could do with a bit of extra, say, charitable help. But if they can't get the numbers out because they're, supporters for one reason and another, maybe more disabled or more disconnected, maybe they, aren't reached in other ways, and they can lose out by this.
And I think that is, the gap that we need to.
And we need to really look at that.
Here it's those less few policies.
So volume is not necessarily what we're after. We're after quality, not quantity.
It's a trade-off.
But it's trade-off.
It should be an aspirational number.
But we'll know we're going forward. If we get more people engaging, we'll get going forward. But we have to be very aware that, we don't want to be away of those things which skew the results.
Here's the paradox: the happier people that are, the less likely they are to engage.
Yes, yeah.
And the confidence.
Yeah, I would say sometimes I think, if you're not looking at some of the basics of life, then perhaps you have got more time to engage with the council. And I think what we need to do is look at some of the demographics around where we are getting engagement, and that's certainly something that I know we're looking at different channels of this. So there's lots of strands of participation. It isn't just about the consultation. It is about who's giving us feedback on a day-to-day basis. So I know that we are working on that to try and draw out, okay, well, we've got 100 people that are in contact with us. Do they represent the diverse areas of Singapore? Are we getting feedback from a small group of people, but over and over again?
This comes overview and scrutiny, and they come again in, I think it is this year. And one of the concerns, and I don't intend to repeat everything, get from what I'm mentioning, is that you get a person filling the consultation and then put one thing in there, because that's obviously their thing. We've also talked about the bus consultation. It favours the outer wards, because the ones who get on the bus, the Mr. Julian just don't know, perhaps occasionally, they have the time to them, so yeah. But let's say this is something that we have looked at now again, and that's been a theme for the last 5 years or since this type of consultation was introduced.
Okay, well, my final point, I won't ask you to go back to the slide, but you spoke about petitions and the process going forward.
Yes.
It's always been a little bit of a mystery to me with petitions, because petition is seen as one input. And, should people write letters individually? 100 people write 100 letters, 100 people sign a petition. What is the process today, and why is there a need to change it? What's wrong with the process today? Can you outline that?
Yeah, I think perhaps where there was a gap is that there wasn't fully defined process beforehand. And as I say, under the legislation, that was a requirement that all councils should have that documented. So how do we receive petitions? What do we do when we receive them? And how will we get back to those residents? So the scheme is really specific now, set out exactly how you can submit. There is even a web form available for people to help them complete it. It does set out slightly different engagement for numbers of residents signing that petition. So if it's over 100, the next step would be to, we have to make sure that it's a valid petition. Is it something that, comes to the Newport City Council, or is it another agency? Is it something for Welsh Government? So those must be considered first. If it meets all those criteria, then it goes to a scrutiny committee, and the lead petitioner is invited to come and present, and then there's discussion there. If it's under 100 signatures, it would go to the cabinet member.
Because we've had occasionally we've had people turn up with petitions outside demanding to hand it over to somebody senior, usually the leader or whatever, and then you find people
into process
at the back door. So the process does need to be clear. So that's a big positive.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yeah, so the link to that petition scheme is included in the slides, and it is something that again was developed with the input of Democratic Services Committee, not last year, but the year before.
It is a valid process, but obviously it's perhaps more vulnerable to abuse than other ways of participating. And certainly, when people let me know that they've got objections, say, to a planning application, some sort, I always encourage people to write in as individuals, because I know that does things if we have, individual letters.
Yeah, and as you say, it's not to supersede, the due process and policy, but just to make sure that there is that other option of people.
And also, we're going to pick out more of the real crux of the issues of people's objections or support, if it's from individual responses, because you can't be picking out some petition. There may be a variety of reasons why people sign petitions.
Any other points on this? Online is Okay, thank you, Leanne. And item 6, postal voting. So back over to you.
Apologies, it's more for me, Chair. So just share my screen. So I know we talked in previous meetings a little bit about the changes coming under the Elections Act 2022, and in previous meetings what we went to in a bit more detail was about voter ID because of the urgency of that. That was implemented in January this year, and the committee were keen that we would come back to talk a little bit more about how that experience was for those polling in England in May this year, and also to talk a little bit more about the absent voting changes which are due to come in stages but will begin later this year in October. So just a bit of a refresher recap then on what happened for voter ID. So the Elections Act received royal assent in April 2022. The bill impacted the administration of the electoral registration and elections, and there were some practical changes that we needed to amend. There were lots of new measures introduced under that Act, but these are the two that we're focusing on today, the voter ID votes. So as I say, the voter ID application portal went live back in January, at the beginning of this year. That doesn't apply to reserved elections, so that is UK parliamentary by-elections, or we call petitions, police and crime commission elections, both in England and in Wales, and for local government elections in England. However, for local government elections in Wales, there is currently no requirement to have voter ID to vote. So, unless there is any UK parliamentary election activity earlier than currently scheduled, to expected next year, for Newport residents, the voter ID application will only be relevant May next year.
So try and do for me.
So we are live. People can apply for voter authority certificates through the government.uk website. We facilitate those. We print those out and send them out. However, we've only had 17 applications so far. Part of that will be because before the England elections, there was a bit of an embargo on communications in Wales to try and make sure that the focus was on those people needing it for the England polls. And as the system was new, just thought to not confuse or overwhelm in any way. So those polls did take place in England earlier this year. As I say, they were the first polls where voter ID was required to be shown in polling stations in order to vote. So just a reminder again that there are some existing voter IDs that can be used in polling stations. So things like passport, driving licence, some travel passes, but there is a full list. I know we've gone through this previously in the committee, and we've been making that really clear to residents. So the England polls, there were 230 areas with 27 million people eligible to vote. And fair to say there's been a high level of scrutiny on the impact of voter ID. However, it is still early days in terms of analysis, so we are expecting some full reports to be published later this year. So the Electoral Commission have already published some interim findings that would be useful to go through, I think. So they found that the awareness of the need to bring the ID to vote was high. So they found that immediately before polling day, 87% of people in England, excluding London because there were no elections there, 87% of people were aware that they needed to show ID to vote at the polling station. And then they carried out another survey immediately following the poll, and they found that it was 92% in areas with election just after.
Sorry, just that first figure there, was that conducted on the day or was this prior to the election?
So the awareness polls were just before and just after, so not on the day.
Right, okay.
So those were assessed then. Awareness did vary across the population and was found to be lower amongst certain groups. So younger age groups, it was only 82% for 18 to 24-year-olds. Black and minority ethnic communities, it was only 82%. And for those who said that they never vote in local elections, it was 84%, so a little bit of a discrepancy there. That 0.25% of people who tried to vote at a polling station, that factors. Yeah, that is quite key. But what they were checking there was people who actually went into a polling station, tried to get a poll card and vote, and were then turned away because they didn't have that vote ID.
Surprised it was as low as that actually.
Yeah, it was
Not point.
Well, it's a building, maybe outside the polling stations. It says something like
Yeah.
no ID, no
Yeah.
vote, so people will never try.
Yeah, there were posters and communications doing just that, and I know there has been some criticism around, well, okay, you know, you're not going to know exactly the truth,
Yeah,
figure,
okay.
but you might have turned up and then have to go home. Just going back to the awareness, it was significantly lower amongst people who said that they didn't have an accepted form of ID. So 74% for that group, but amongst those who did have ID, it was 94%. So you can see that there is a bit of a gap being created there. And whilst overall awareness levels were high, some groups of people were significantly less likely to know about the requirement. So they might not have known that they needed to show ID until they arrived at the polling station, as we were just talking about. And they might not have known that they could obtain the voter authority certificate either. So, you know, there's a bit of a challenge there and something that we need to factor in as part of our communication planning. So overall for England, 25,000 certificates were used as a form of ID on the 4th of May. So 89,500 people applied for a voter authority certificate before the deadline on the 25th of April. So there is a discrepancy in the figures there, and I think in further analysis, the full report, they will do some detail around what the difference between the applications and the those issued were. So indications are that 0.7% of people who tried to vote at a polling station were initially turned away, but around 2/3 of those people returned later in the day and were able to vote. So this is where the 0.25% figure finally lands, and this equates to about 14,000 voters in total. So in their findings, the Electoral Commission found that around 4% of all non-voters said they didn't vote because of the voter ID requirement. Some people would have wanted to vote at the polling station, but decided not to try because they realised they didn't have the accepted ID before attempting to vote. And then there was going to be some further analysis to understand that before the publication of a report in September. The portion of non-voters given an ID-related reason for not voting rose from 4% to 7% from survey respondents. So from previous years where they asked people why they didn't vote, not having the correct ID has gone up to 7%. There is some evidence that some people find it harder than others to show accepted voter ID. So this includes disabled people and the unemployed. And again, further data collection and analysis will be needed to establish a clearer picture, and that will be shared at a later date. So there are some recommendations that the Electoral Commission are putting through to UK government around being able to collect and monitor data on the impact of voter ID at future elections. So perhaps extending the data collection that was already in place, and work is needed to improve that quality and reliability of data at the polling stations. What they did find was that the voter confidence and satisfaction levels were very similar to previous elections, so there doesn't seem to have any impact there. So another group that has looked at the impact of voter ID and the polls in England were democracy volunteers. So this is an independent group of volunteers. However, they are accredited, and their mission really is to improve the quality of elections for the benefits of voters through advising the legislators, officials and the Electoral Commission. And they support these election bodies with constructive feedback on areas of concern, so that they can consider action to remedy it. So they look at empirical evidence and statistical analysis, and they had 150 accredited observers at the English Open elections. They generally form teams of 2, sometimes 3, and in total they attended 879 polling stations across all the regions of England. They spent between 30 and 45 minutes at each poll, so they observed the process and then completed 1 survey for each of the polling stations. In general, their teams attended between 10 and 15 polling stations in their day. So as you can see, they have an infographic that they've shared below. So 1.2% of those who attended polling stations were turned away because they lacked the relevant ID or were judged to not have it. What they have said they observed is that of those turned away, 53 were identified by observers as being non-white passing, and the team did see other people being allowed to vote despite it. So I've included a link here to their full report, and they've got some more information. So just jumping back then to raising awareness, I say there will be further reports because there's lots more work to be done on those polls. It is a relatively short amount of time since they took place, and any further updates will be shared with the committee. So the Electoral Commission is going to run the National Public Communication Campaign to raise awareness to support those without ID, so they know how and when they can apply for those ID documents. And as I said earlier, there was an always approach to state that we would not be doing any communications in Wales for the reasons previously stated, but for Newport residents, the commencement of that engagement plan and communication will start in September. So we don't want to leave it till we know there is an election imminent. We do want to start to feed that information through, and again, we've talked about in the committee before, looking at some of the harder to reach groups and making sure that research carried out by the Electoral Commission on which groups might be more at risk of disenfranchisement. Those would be the groups that we look to engage with part of that plan.
I'm sure we'd all welcome that engagement process starting as soon as possible. It isn't like it's unknown next election will be. It's quite certain it won't be too long away.
Yeah, I think starting in September, there's a little bit of a balance between if we went too early, people have these certificates which are on an A4 piece of paper, they're going to do something to put all in someone's favour, maybe not be able to find it.
I just worry about reaching everybody, particularly those hard to reach groups do take a lot of time and energy to reach.
Yeah, certainly.
Do we have any data from previous elections of people who have been, we've been looking at 65% turnout in the next general election, thereabouts. So 35% of people have never engaged anyway. Do we know anything about this 35%?
We can certainly do, bring something back on that. Yeah, of course.
Is that stretching your resources to try and get that sort of research?
Well, there is a part of the electoral registration that we try to engage with people. We try and maximise the number of people that are on the electoral register for every single election. We've done a lot of work around the newer franchises. So I know they can't vote in every election, but the 16 to 17-year-olds. So having a plan in place and making sure that we are trying to reach everybody that isn't on the electoral register is really key. Our annual canvassing is part of that, which we're doing at the moment. But we can certainly come back and share something on what we do on an annual basis and perhaps some of the targeted approaches that we take as well.
I've got a couple of points. Tim, do you have any?
Yeah, sorry. I'd just like to ask, because I keep losing the sound. It might have been already asked. These postal ID votes, are they applied for online or through an hard copy?
So the voter IDs are for when you actually turn up at a poll station and you're going to vote in person. So if you are doing an absent vote, so you've got a postal vote or a proxy vote, the person going on behalf of you as a proxy would need a voter ID, but you don't need one for postal votes. But there's a little bit more in the presentation once we talked about the
I think you misunderstood my question. Oh. When applying for a photo ID to vote, have you got to apply online for it, or do you put it through as an hard copy to apply for voter ID?
So if you're applying for voter ID, it's online, but you can come to the Civic and support would be provided by the electoral registrations team. So ideally,
I was just make a suggestion, sorry, that if we can have an ad copy for people to apply for photo ID, when canvassing, we can hand them out at the same time as when we're canvassing.
I think ideally
Not everybody is a little, confident of going online and applying. And I know in the past I've tried to apply for things, and trying to get your photograph onto a computer is hard work.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think what we have in place is that people can come to the Civic and we would help them. We'd even take the photo of them as well. But I think there's some challenges around photos that we can accept, which is a little trickier when doing it by paper. So I think ideally either do it online if that's within your capability, or if that is a challenge for digital skills, whatever the reason might be, then people can come to the Civic and we can support them that way.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, I think what we could do, Councillor Harvey, is perhaps give some information, some of the flyers that we'll be producing on that process and photo ID being required that could be shared to all candidates.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks. That was one of my points as well, so that's good. With COVID, I imagine we've seen a lot of people migrating to postal votes. Is that trend going to continue, do you think?
I think so. So in Newport, we have about 20% of our total electoral register registered for postal votes. That has gone up significantly in COVID, and we are seeing year-on-year increases. So yeah, that is certainly something I would expect to continue. What trajectory, I'm not sure.
My other point, and is looking for a corner case, an anomaly perhaps. So with the PCC elections,
yeah,
that is a UK mandate for ID. So
yeah, UK PCC, England and Wales require voter ID.
Right. Now, I'm not sure about how the elections clash going forward, but would there be a corner case where you could have a PCC election and an assembly election happening at the same time?
Yes.
Where somebody goes in and vote for a PCC if they've got ID, but they don't need ID to vote for the Welsh Assembly. So
yeah.
Is that a strange anomaly?
So one of the challenges of some of this legislation creating divergence is around processes for different elections. And that obviously is magnified when you've got multiple polls running on the same day. There's a little bit about that. It gets even more challenging when we're thinking about postal votes as well. So yeah, absolutely, divergence is an issue. I know this is something that we've talked about within the committee before around, it's a challenge and for council to be aware of the differences, and then it's even more of a challenge to make sure that all of the residents in the community are aware. So I guess you almost go to a place of, if you're not sure, bring a voter ID, don't you? And then obviously you can find people at the poll station. But we do really need to be as engaging as possible with residents to make sure that they understand the differences. Yeah, I think once we get into the postal ID side of it, postal vote side of it, those differences will become even clearer and more of a challenge.
I mean, it's not something we probably might debate, but the point of bringing this in, I suppose, is to reduce fraud. And I think the perception was most fraud. It was committed.
Government figures, it was on votes, but it was so tiny.
Yes.
That it could be said that it was a massive waste of money going through this process.
Yeah. But we don't explore that in this meeting, don't we? Okay, any other points, questions, observations on this or anything else you might have missed?
That's a question.
Yes, I can't.
Councillor Perkins.
So, Councillor Perkins, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh my
How long would the voter ID be valid for? Is it just for the one election, or is it for longer?
I believe
And also,
sorry,
and also,
I believe it's 12 months, but I'd have to check. I believe it's 12 months.
okay. And will the need for having ID be included in the electoral register paperwork that we send out?
We would certainly be including some flyers around voter ID. So I know we've just started our canvassing activity. So even in those canvassing letters, we're putting the flyers in to, let people know about voter ID. So at every opportunity we have, we will certainly be reminding residents, including, issuing poll cards and such.
Thank you.
This is another thing, isn't it? If it's only valid for a year. I mean, we just discussed earlier on, making people aware of this earlier rather than later. And you said, well, they've got to keep hold of a piece of A4.
I must caveat that, Councillor Thomas, I need to check. I think it's 12 months.
Right. Okay, but I mean, there is this issue here about, 12 months seems, again, really expensive process if our staff have got to engage in this on such a regular basis to reissue these things.
Yeah, I think.
And actually quite exhausting for residents as well. There's likely to be renewing your voter ID fatigue creeping at some point on this. I mean, we've got enough challenges getting people to engage. We've talked before about participation engagement. The most obvious thing that we have, the highest profile thing that citizens can do is engage in voting. And it strikes me, I know, this isn't anything Newport can influence, it's being decided at a far higher level. But what an expensive way of putting people off voting.
Could I ask a question on that? With regards to the cost of implementing it, is there any funding made available, or is it the council absorbing those costs?
So there is some new burdens funding available for the changes in the legislation. If I'm honest, Newport has had some to support some of the aspects of it. So the voter ID stuff is intended to be fulfilled elsewhere. So you click the gov.uk form, that comes through to our staff. We then verify it and do all the checks that need to be done before it then goes back to a central fulfilment centre, and then that gets posted and sent out. So, the cost for us has been around staffing, equipment, we need things to take photos of people who come to visit it, that kind of thing. So that has been covered. What I would expect to see is that, in the financial year leading up to election, there won't be further new burdens funds.
And that's from you, I think.
Yeah,
One-off, that would imply it's a one-off.
and as far as we
keep
are
on with this
aware,
process.
yes. There's no indication that it would go beyond the initial transfer.
Are there considerations through the chair? I beg your pardon. Are there considerations that have to be made about taking people's photographs? Are there storage issues on this? I mean, this.
Yeah, of course, it would be covered under GDPR, and privacy statements and such would be, they're amended to make sure that that's covered, and we wouldn't keep the photo ID after it's been issued.
Or whatever.
Yeah,
It would be.
but obviously, through the process, and obviously elections data is subject to the highest level of protection.
Chair, I don't want to extend the debate, but there's an even bigger problem with Muslim women and when Balibar. So it's a real can of worms. And I went through this with Cardiff University of how we identified our students and whether some of them were strict Muslims and they were masks, and others were more liberal, and they were, and it's an absolute.
We haven't had any feedback on that from the polls yet, but I know, as part of the Wales requirements, we are looking to have privacy areas within polling stations, particularly thinking about demographics or communities and where that might be more helpful than others. But space in polling stations can sometimes be a challenge just when getting a polling station in the first place. So I think having a bit of a review of the polling stations, accessibility is another aspect of the new legislation. There's quite a lot of things to consider while we're gearing up for the next round of elections.
And surely a lot of this has been considered with passports because this is a generic issue, I think, but perhaps we don't want to go down that route.
Well, you wonder whether these things have been considered. They're not very clear to us whether they have been considered. And that's no criticism of that.
So that does raising the question about the discretion, if you like, of in the polling stations. So if somebody comes in to vote, and I think you alluded to the fact that some people did vote without ID. Did you say? Did I get that?
One of the observations of the
Yeah.
democracy volunteers.
So the question, I suppose, just out of interest, is does the person, I forget the title of the person who's controlling the election, do they have any discretion at all to say if you have an ID, you are from an ethnic group? There's the discretion here.
I think ultimately the senior officer in that polling station, the decision lies with them, and that cannot be challenged there and then. However, I think what we're seeing anecdotally from the polls in England is that, you know, some people's level of discretion was up here and some people's was down here.
Absolutely.
So some people, you know, photographed and that's like yeah, so I think there is more to do on that, but that would be based on evidence rather than the anecdotal stuff that's coming through at the moment. And then that would have to be, you know, formally looked at.
Okay, I think there's a lot of interesting things we could talk about, but we need to contain ourselves, I guess, to the issues that we
Do you
can.
have a few more slides, Chair? So
Oh, we do?
apologies.
Oh, sorry, yes, that's what you.
Well, so that is the voter ID side of it
Yes,
anyway.
simply because this is national legislation, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
we don't have any discretion to council level, you know.
So the next part, which we briefly touched on last time, but there wasn't much clarity in how it would be progressed, was the postal and proxy voting reform. So the statutory instrument to implement the Elections Act made changes to postal and proxy voting and introduced an online application service for those voting methods. So that was before Parliament in July earlier this month. And that has actually made some significant changes to the last version published by UK government, which was back in May 2023. So first of all, having online absent voting applications is a new thing. So similarly, I guess they're modernising, looking at, you know, more services online. It's a good thing in general. And again, it does only apply to reserved elections. So we are in a place again with some elections you can apply online for a postal or proxy vote, but local elections in Wales, you would not be able to do that. There's also changes to the renewal date for postal voters in these reserved elections. So what will happen is that for a UK General or a PCC in Newport, you would have to reapply for your postal vote every 3 years. But for your local postal vote, you would only have to reapply every 5 years. So what that is going to mean is we're going to have to have almost concurrent lists under the electoral registration systems. So I think, you know, there's been some challenge back around that and around, you know, that we all use one of two systems. The electoral administrators really only two that are widely used. And in each of them, we can see that there are some challenges and some tricky issues that need to be overcome before we'll be able to manage this effectively. So I think that went back, and this is why we've had some extension on the dates. Previously, all the changes to these would have started on a rolling basis from October this year. Lots of those dates now have been put back, as you can see, to January 24, 25 and 26. So yeah, this issue of divergence and making it absolutely clear. So it's something for council, it's something for our poll station staff, so they're absolutely clear on who should be voting what with in poll stations, and obviously for our voters as well. That's the most important part.
That's probably it's not hard enough to get people out to vote for this.
Exactly.
You know, we got 40% to or 20% to.
Well, if you see those problems now, wait till AI gets involved, artificial intelligence, and the people taken out and the computer says no. But, okay,
So postal votes, then we are still waiting on, you know, having those systems lined up, making sure that the devil is in the detail, isn't it? And making sure that we're absolutely clear on how this can be administrated on a basic level. And then what we would not start to do is communicate with residents until advance of the 31st of January. So yes, so it is going to be a transitional process of people moving over. It's not something we need to worry about writing to voters yet, but we see it as something that's coming down the line. And as we've already touched on a lot of this, you know, the challenges are the unknowns at the moment, so we don't know the full divergence impacts. We don't have all the details required on the administration or the funding for digital requirements testing as yet. So that will come out over the next few weeks, I believe. The Department of Levelling Up Housing and Communities has stated that they're working very closely with Scottish and Welsh governments, electoral administrators and representative bodies on how best to mitigate and manage the impacts of these differences. They've also stated that they have designed the digital service, so the online postal vote application service and associated changes to facilitate the divergence. So our electoral registration systems will hold the records for both reserved and devolved polls. And they will continue to work on any challenges identified. DLUC have also stated that since the passage of the Elections Act, Scottish and Welsh governments have expressed an interest in applying the online route to devolved polls in the future. So for postal vote application, you know, potentially local votes would be postal votes online as well in future, but I haven't seen anything else come out about that yet. It would require legislation in UK Parliament, so potentially there will of route to that. So I think that was it from my presentation. I know we've covered, you know, lots of the divergence and the communication elements in the earlier part of the presentation.
I think that was very informative. It was a good opportunity for people to ask questions, and thank you very much. Date of the next meeting, 23rd of November 2023, 10 o'clock. I think that concludes the meeting, unless anybody has anything to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Really well turned. Thank you.